Welcome back to Rich Lessons. And sometimes it's just Sheena and I, and we're up here doing our thing. But every once in a while, we have to bring on a very special guest. And I couldn't be more excited and also surprised because he doesn't do stuff like this. And so I am super happy to have Mr. Roy Glapion on Rich Lessons today.
Oh,
Welcome.
Am I the special guest?
You are the special guest. You are. And y'all about to find out exactly why. So I don't really read long bios, but I'm going to just share a little bit about him. So he is a native New Orleans. He graduated from UNO with a degree in civil engineering. He has practiced his profession with numerous prominent engineering firms located throughout the greater New Orleans area, although he is most certainly nationwide and global in his reach and approach. He had emphasis in structural design. He has extensive experience in foundation, vertical structure, flood wall, bridge, and drainage design. He is the co-founder of Citywide Testing and Inspections. He serves as the president at one point of this organization. At its peak, Citywide employed over 100 people and was a multi-disciplined construction, environmental, and geotechnical testing. That's a lot of words. He's going to break that down to us in a second. Laboratory with offices across the South. As the prime consultant, Citywide provided services on a number of prestigious projects such as the New Orleans Sports Arena, Superdome roof improvements, the Jordan Road overpass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Y'all get the point. You get the point. But we are super excited to have you here, Roy, on Rich Lessons. So welcome.
Glad to be here.
What did I miss? I know I missed a lot of the legacy of your family. We're going to get into it. But what did I not share that you want to share to our audience?
That's more on, like, I guess you could say, the professional side. My true passion is on the giving back side, being involved in the community. My parents have always been educators and have always said, to whom much is given, much is required. So my sister and I, we've pretty much run along those lines. I appreciate the introduction. It's all based on hard work. But the community is where my true passion is, especially at this point in my career, no doubt.
So I was telling Sheena that if I just want to pop my gums about politics and get some insight, or you always keep your ear to the ground when it relates to politics, but this is the person that I go to. But you have had your hand in a number of successful elections. But what I actually met you through was through business and through your company.
Right.
And so where do you go from being a graduate of UNO to saying, I want to go into business versus being in the community like your father, like your parents? And you're still in the community, but they were educators. You went into business.
Yeah, well, it all starts with what direction do you want your life to go in? You know, that's the key. You have to be, confident in your ability and what you want to do. And then you structure your life based on that. So I like to say the biggest enemy you have is the person you see in the morning when you brush your teeth, and hopefully everybody brushes their teeth, right? So the challenges that come throughout the daily grind are really associated with the person that you're looking at when you brush your teeth in the morning. So it sounds simple, but it really is complicated in the sense that people have a tendency to blame other people or society or where they started in life, what family they were born into, when really this is the richest country on the planet where you can become or anything you want to become and start from absolutely nothing. So you have to be confident in your ability and overcome the challenges that are set forth in front of you to be able to get to where you want to be. Right. So my parents, they were both educators. But my dad used to work multiple jobs as an educator. And one of them was cleaning the floors of City Hall, basically janitorial services. And he became a council person and had a great opportunity to become the mayor of New Orleans. So, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. Right. But you have to have the vision within yourself to say, I want to get to this level. And then I want to get to that level. And then I want to get to that level, right? You can eat the elephant. You have to eat it one bite at a time. So a lot of times in today's society, we want to eat the elephant in one big bite, right? You can't do that. You have to take your time, be patient, and have the vision and the drive and determination. And it starts with who you look at in the morning, right? Not anybody else. It's just you. You roll by yourself, and then you need everybody else to get to where you need to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about what the subject of this conversation would be, and something that just kind of popped in my head is this idea of what the internet or what people online gets wrong about building wealth, right? And building like generational wealth and trying to like pass that down for you, like to your sons so that they do it and they continue on the legacy. But from your perspective, what do people get wrong on the internet, you know, Twitter fingers, people who think they know everything but don't even know half of what it takes?
So
what are
when
they
you
getting
say
wrong?
people, our people, or
Anybody.
those people?
Well, shoot, what are those people?
Oh, that's a. I mean, I understand what you're saying from the different frames of it. I would actually start with first from, mainly from the Black community, because, and the reason I'll say I would like your answer there first is because as a race, as a culture, we are so far behind the ball in a lot of different ways. And now we are now in a social media age where it's like we're chasing or we're looking for information, but a lot of the people who can give the information are not online, and they're not. I feel like we're not getting the full story, and so therefore we're chasing something that is not necessarily the way that is not the path of where we should be going. So I would love to know from your perspective of our community first, where do we get it wrong?
So we get everything wrong. And we rely on social media way too much because there's so much misinformation. And the information that's good information, let me rephrase that. The information that's bad information, we won't research to see if it truly is bad information. So people are trying to brand themselves and it's all bad information. But we think it's good information, it's bad information. I'm going to work this question in the best way I can because there's a lot of information that needs to be spread through the questions that you just asked, right? So one is, what is wealth, right? What is wealth? What is wealth defined in the Black community is totally different from what is wealth in the white community, okay? It's totally different, right? I'll give you an example. I sat down many moons ago when I was you guys' age, and I thought I was all that, and I sat with a prominent banker, and I said, I want to know where I am from a wealth standpoint in this community. And he said, okay, well, how much could you write a check for and not feel it? You wouldn't want to lose it, but you wouldn't feel it. So I told him, and he sat back and he said, it's a big number. I'm like, yeah, it's big.
I'm doing it.
He said, well, hang on, young man. You asked me where were you in this community called New Orleans. He said, in the Black community, you're in the less than 1 percentile of people who could write that check. I said, what? Serious? He's like, oh, yeah. But that's not what you asked me. You asked me, where are you in this community? He said, in this community, that includes everybody. If I asked that same question to white folks, they'd be wrapped around this building with a multiplier of 10 on that number that you just said. So you're nowhere. Nowhere. And that drove me to work even harder. So when we look at wealth, and I have another story, but when we look at wealth from a standpoint of we've never had wealth. We know how to spend, but we don't know how to save.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we've never had anything. So someone once told me that Black folks act the way they act because they're not used to being crabs in the basket.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Isn't that what you said? You said that.
Yeah,
said
the crabs aren't actually meant to be
in a basket. So sometimes we act the way we act because we are in that position. So we have a tendency to step on ourselves, right? Instead of helping ourselves. Other races, they help each other. We don't. Mm-hmm. When we see wealth within our community, we want to bust each other in the head, right? Or we talk about each other. Or we say things like, and I hate this word, we bougie. Bougie. What do you mean you bougie? What does that mean? Mm-hmm. I'm acting like I'm white because I got money, right? What is that all about? So we actually attack ourselves when we become successful. Mm-hmm. That's insane. That's insanity, right? But we don't understand wealth. We don't understand wealth. We don't understand the true value of money, number one, to save because we're too busy showboating on what we have, right? Because we never had anything. Does it make sense? So when you look at wealth, I look at wealth through the eyes of some of the people who I know are truly wealthy. So a good friend of mine, who at the time was worth $3 billion, he tried to get into a club. He couldn't get into the club, so he's trying to get into the club, right? I said billion. So we come out of the club, and I didn't see any fancy cars, no jewelry, anything like that, right? True story. God help me. So I'm riding with his wife, and I said, I don't understand why you want to be in this club.
That's what I would ask.
She said, well, you didn't see any cars, you didn't see any jewelry, you didn't see anything like that, right? I said, no, I did not. She said, because in this club, when you show that you have money, you don't have money. Mm-hmm. Very prestigious club. These are the people who are shaping everything. Everything, right? Now they're worth $5.5 billion, and they're still regular people. My point is, when you're exposed to that, that's wealth. That is true wealth. When you sit down with someone and you say, hey, man, what are you going to do with those paintings in your closet? I don't know. I don't have any room for them in my house, but he's got Picassos in his closet. That's wealth. You follow what I'm saying? We don't have that kind of money. We're too busy thinking about what the next person's doing. We're too busy following things, right? We're too busy looking at women a certain way. We're the only race of people who have people shaking their you-know-what and looking up to them and talking about the in this, the in that, the in this, the in that, and we buying all that music, right? Now, I believe in artistry. There's no question about it. But why are we the only race of people who degrade our own people, right?
Well, that's definitely...
And we buy it.
So the thought of that is like, it reminds me of like something that Oprah said, right? And so for the longest, Oprah would never have JayZ on because he represented that type of music to her. And so the only time, but here's the thing that I'm going to make the correlation with, when someone got it from that era, right, our community. So you think about JayZ. So he comes from a space where generally the music he used to make, in certain ways, it was like degrading to women, which is why Oprah never wanted him on our show. But what changed about that is he married Beyonce. And so Beyonce basically said, well, to have me, you got to have JayZ. This is also during a time where JayZ started to understand what wealth looked like. He started understanding that he wanted to be in different circles, and he started understanding what he wanted his legacy to be. And so now the things that JayZ will remember him from back in the day is no longer the JayZ today that he has kind of transformed himself into.
No question about it. And what I could tell the listeners is that in order for you to get forward, you got to know where you came from, right? So, and you have to know why and how you got in the situation that you're into as a race of people, right? So I always tell, and particularly my white friends, you need to watch the movie 13th. Go watch the movie 13th, and you can better understand what black folks have gone through and why we are where we are, and sometimes why we act the way we act. Good, bad, or indifferent, right? So when we talk about wealth, it's hard for us to get to the next level, nearly impossible at this point in time because we're so far behind, right? So I can't remember the program, but let's say, well, there was a program, was a program where an individual fights in a war. He's white guy, never been exposed to black folks. He's now in a foxhole with a black guy. They fight and they become friends. They come back to America, and the white guy gets a loan from a bank, and he says, hey, my black friend, look, you don't need to go to the bank and get a loan. I just got a house in a thing called a subdivision. What's a subdivision? I don't know, but it's new houses, and you can get a loan because you fought in the war with me. Then he tries to go get the loan. He's black, and the bank says, that's not happening, but you can go live in this red district. So now the white family has home ownership, right? They sell the house, give it to their kids, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, we living in a housing project.
Right.
And when you try to stack that, meaning years past, they have what's now called generational wealth, and we don't. We don't. So my brother-in-law, whose family was part of the Tulsa crisis, right? He told me, he says, Roy, look, if that had continued the way it was going and my family had the hotel and blah, 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 I'd have started my company with $150 million. Instead, he started with $150,000, and now he has $14 billion in assets. But at the end of the day, what would he have had?
Right, if he would have started from...
Right. So when we look at wealth, and if I could share it with your folks, is always assume that you have absolutely nothing. And one thing John told me, says, man, I don't buy depreciating assets. I don't. I buy appreciating assets. I don't need to have a car and drive around that's depreciated. So you take that in context, and to anyone looking and listening to this, would you take $100,000, okay, and then the next day take $10,000 off and throw it in the garbage can? The answer is no. But we do it all the time. We just do it in a different way because we want people to look at us.
So in the influencer age of social media, now we're going in the generation of everyone is to look at us, right? So Asian, Black, white, Hispanic, every single race now has stepped into the look at me, right? They are like in together, kind of that generation, right?
The Gen Z is definitely.
The Gen Zs, like they are more of like the flashy, the I want this, I want that, I want to kind of show it off to generation. But for that generation who's coming up behind us, your son is in that generation, what are you telling them that will begin to ensure that they not only can build wealth, but they are shifting away from what you just discussed, a few moments ago?
The running joke is like, if it's not on social media, it doesn't happen. Like, it's not real unless you show it. Like, that's what people say about social media.
Yeah.
And to some extent, that's 100% true. But the basis of how you accumulate wealth are still the same. And once you get it, you have to hold it, and you have to save it, and you have to invest it, right? But how you get there, the path is changing. There's no question about it. But the foundation of how you get there is still the same. I still believe in a strong, good educational background, right? Traditional education. That's me. But also, traditional education to me is trade schools, right? You can go to a trade school and get a degree and paying you $80-something thousand a year, and then you can start your own trucking company. You see what I mean? Like the vision has to be there. If you fall into the trap of just true social media, is that really going to get you where you want to be? There's a possibility, right? Well, there's a possibility of you being the next Michael Jordan. Is it going to happen? Probably not,
Probably
right?
not.
So you explore all avenues. My sons have been trained, right? Their minds are trained in a certain way where they understand the basis of wealth, but they also understand that they have to crawl before they walk. I mean, my boys right now are talking about owning their own airlines and branding their airlines. The oldest one has become, he's a pilot right now, and he's becoming the next level of a pilot. I mean, they're like, they can accomplish anything, but they have to start somewhere. They have to start somewhere, right? So whether it's Gen Z, X, Y, Z, whatever it is, the foundation is still the same. You have to believe in yourself, right? You have to understand the era that you're in, what works, what doesn't work. You have to assume that failure is just something that helps you learn, meaning nothing can stop me. But you also have to be a realist, right? You're not going to be the next Michael Jordan if you're 5'2".
Right.
As an example, right? And you have to keep your options open. In addition, you have to attack your fears. Okay, so I always put myself in a situation that's uncomfortable. If I'm in a comfortable situation, you can't learn. I have to be in a difficult situation. I've taught my boys the same thing. You have to go where you're not supposed to go, right?
Right.
Because then you'll learn, right? But you also have to understand, and I'm saying a lot here, the value of $1. So I want to just be real quick with this. When we were younger, when my boys were younger, and we'd go to restaurants, there are two things that we would do. One, we'd have a conversation about the people in the room. So the people in the room in most of the restaurants we went to, because we bougie, right? Not at all. Were white folks, right? And I don't have a racist bone in my body, but they were white folks. And I said, who in this restaurant looks like you? Nobody, right? And I'd also say, if you go to the hospital, do you go to a white hospital or a black hospital? I'm teaching them. I'm teaching them, right? I said, these people have what's called residual income. So they can go to this restaurant. We have residual income. And they started to realize that we don't have any money as a people because there's not 40 of us in a restaurant and 2 of them, right? That's a real statement. The other thing we would do is something called bet the bill. So bet the bill meant that when we got the check, we would bet the bill, and they'd have to, whoever got closest to the cost of the bill would get 10% of the bill, right? And so what they learned is that the food is not free, okay? You have to pay for this, right? And they started to understand the value of the $1. Daddy has to pay for this, right? So now I can't take them to a fancy restaurant. They won't go. They're like, I'm not paying. You're not paying that much for a steak.
Right. They don't.
Right?
They're like, we're not doing it.
What I'm saying is they understand the value of $1, and it doesn't grow outside in the backyard. My point is, we as a people, I don't think we understand the power and the value of $1 because we're too busy showing everybody what we we have.
What's interesting is one reason why I actually like traveling to like DC, Atlanta, New York is because you actually do see Black people in expensive restaurants. And so I always think about, like, you're right, in New Orleans, if you go to mid to like more elevated restaurants, the majority of the people in those rooms are going to be white patrons, right? But if you go to like DC, if you go to Atlanta, you could tell that the Black people that live there have more residual income, right? Because they're dining with their family.
It's still different because I remember, so I started my first tech company in college, and I left. I guess my parents' wishes, more so my dad. I left Mississippi and I moved to Silicon Valley, San Jose to be exact. And I always tell that I'm telling this story because I was in San Jose. I left San Jose. I built my first tech company out ultimately in Austin, Texas. So I learned tech, and I also learned wealth from people who did not look like me. You don't find too many of us in Silicon Valley or Austin.
Right.
So the people who were teaching me about building wealth, teach me about how tech companies can turn you into, from an investment side, or building how they became millionaires or billionaires. And then my second company, I started in New York, but I ultimately built that company out in Atlanta. And I always would tell people, I was like, living in Atlanta was so different in building a tech company. And I always say, I love my people. I am so proud to be Black. I love my people.
Absolutely.
But it just wasn't for me in the sense of I had learned wealth in a different way than how Atlanta displays wealth.
But do you feel like you learned the essence of Black wealth, though?
I don't, like to his point earlier, wealth in Black community and wealth in the white community don't look the same. Because when I was in San Jose, most people drove at the time, especially a Prius, a Camry, a 3 Series BMW. Now, mind you, because one thing I do have people be like, well, they got, fancy cars too. They do. They definitely have a Lamborghini at home. They definitely got an Escalade at home.
Definitely.
But they drive like once a week, or it's like the Sunday car, or it's very different. Whereas when I was in Atlanta, they was going to drive that Lamborghini, baby, every day. Like, they was going to show that I got a Lamborghini at home. So it's not to take away from Atlanta, because I'm proud of my Black people in Atlanta and DC. But because I had learned wealth from the white community more so, it was very different being in Atlanta.
Sure. Absolutely. And it's because, in my opinion, because you've already seen it. You have it. I'm guilty of it. I mean, I know where I live. She knows where I live. You know what I mean? And my boys are like, oh, we're not doing this. They're used to it. No, Dad, that costs too much. The property taxes, but they're used to it. So I like to joke and I say, look, one of my favorite programs is Twilight Zone. All right, I don't know if y'all know what Twilight Zone is.
Yes.
So, and the reason is because when you look at Twilight Zone, okay, you see wealth in the white community in the 50s. You see swimming pools, and you see this. The couple of episodes they have with Black folks, they're like in a housing project, and one is a boxer or whatever.
Maybe I need to go back and watch Twilight Zone to get that, to pick that up.
So when you look at, you can understand that the wealth for them started a long time ago, right? So if they have a Lamborghini, they're using it as an appreciating asset. We're using it to drive that bad boy around and say, look, I made it. I made it. No, you didn't, right? So the educational piece is, and it's really difficult because we're not there yet. We're not used to it yet. I mean, we're just not. And it's not our fault.
It's not our fault.
It's truly not our fault. And we can't blame the politicians as well. I mean, in New Orleans, we've had 40 years of African-American leadership at the top. But our African-American community still is situated in a way where we make 13 times less than our white counterparts. Why is that? Why is it? Because we have been set up to fail. Because we being the political parties, whether it's Bold, Life, Soul, Coop, whatever it is, we've been set up to attack each other, and the white folks have controlled those political organizations. Divide and conquer. Right? So we still, 40 years of leadership, we still are make 13 times less than our white counterparts. When I was in high school, many moons ago, Atlanta was this little country town, and New Orleans had almost 1 million people. Right? Now, We broke as that, you know what I'm saying? In Atlanta, you drive around and you go to restaurants and black folks got money.
Yeah. Black
Because
excellence.
Maynard Jackson stepped up and said, you want to play?
Yeah.
This is how you're going to play. We've never done that.
Yeah. Here's a stat. We were talking about, Austin and I were talking about this because he didn't believe it, but I said, well, let me go fact check it. And it was real. So in Atlanta, the average net worth of black people is $5,000 in Atlanta. In New Orleans, it's $14,000. In Charlotte, it's $48,000. But in each of those cities, the average net worth of the white counterpart is like, to your point, 10x, 12x. I was actually surprised that, New Orleans, but it's per capita, so there's more people in Atlanta, so it's more people to go by.
Right.
But generally speaking, you talked about like what you saw in Atlanta, but the stats say that the average net worth is only 5,000 people of black people in Atlanta.
$5,000.
$5,000, yes. Yeah. And so I was thinking about that, but it made me think about Charlotte, because Charlotte's was literally almost like 9-10 times that of black people in Atlanta. So I was like, dang, we don't talk about Charlotte black people enough, because clearly they got something, they're doing something right as it relates to growing black wealth in Charlotte. But how many times do you hear people talk about people in Charlotte? Black people. You don't.
You don't hear anything.
But what you do hear, and what is true, numbers, stats, as a whole, we are still headed to zero than we are heading anywhere else. Our net worth as a culture is still headed this way, not that way.
And from a... Oh, gosh, I'm about to get on this soapbox. So... I think the community as a whole, the black community as a whole, hasn't accepted the fact that it's okay to be black and rich and wealthy. We have trouble with that, and if we have trouble with that, how are we gonna move forward, right? You almost can't. So what I'm telling my politicians, my political friends, it's okay to say I'm gonna make some black people rich. Mm-hmm. Some black folks who have legitimate businesses. You know what? They're going to be the prime on this project, and you're going to be the sub.
Which is what happened in Atlanta.
I was like,
that's what happened in
But exactly.
Yeah. He said, this airport, if you're going to come through here, 50% of this.
Capable, competent, but it's okay to say it. Mm-hmm. So we have a challenge going on in New Orleans right now with a garbage contract, Mm-hmm. And there's a problem, in my opinion, because it's a $72 million contract going to a black firm, right? And so comments are made on the radio station but Sydney is doing it much better than you could ever do it. How do you know? I never did it yet. Mm-hmm. And it's these words that they put out there, right, that make you think that this company is inferior, right? And they chase it down this whole rabbit hole to get us thinking that he can't do it, when really he can do it. And Sydney's doing a good job, but what makes you think he can't do a job as good or better?
That's a great point.
And then we buy into it and we beat up our own people.
Yeah, that's a great point, because at the end of the day, because we never had it, someone has to give it to us, right? And not give it to us because we can go and win it. Like that, to your point, that contractor can win it fair and square, but people are saying, oh, give it to the white man because he's tried and true. But because he has historically always had it, in order for you to break up the contracting dynamics and to give it to someone else, like a black contractor, is that you have to basically say they can do it too, right? Versus saying, oh, no, I don't want people to get mad at me by not giving it to the person they know can do it, because I don't want, you should be taking a risk, quote unquote, even though the person has the capabilities already. So that's a great point, because in these major cities that are also run by black mayors, they kind of have to take a hit in certain communities by saying, no, we're going to go with the minority or diverse supplier.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been so many lessons. You guys don't have enough time. I'm telling you, when I tell you I have been through it.
But let's talk about that, because you are kind of tried and true. We always get a lot of questions around how do you break into government contracting? And it could be like a really hard, political, tough space to break into. But for those who want to break into government contracting, or those who want to go from a subcontractor to a prime, what does that path look like for minority suppliers?
As I said earlier, you have to really believe in yourself. And you have to go in places that you're not comfortable with. You really do. That's what you have to do. You have to sell yourself. You have to sell your business. You have to sell your confidence, right? I mean, I told people that don't look like me, how do you know I can do it unless you give me a shot? You can't assume anything, you know? And of course, I have the education to back it up, right? But can't say I can't do it unless you give me a shot. All I'm asking you to do is give me a shot, right? So, story. I'm going to a fundraiser, and it's in an area that I wasn't comfortable with, right? And I actually called the house and I said, look, let me just tell you where I am in case I don't come out of here, right? So I walk in, and it was kind of like the Eddie Murphy movie where he walks into this saloon and the whole place freezes, right? I'm dating myself again. Anyway, they had a bunch of people in there that didn't look like me. So I felt uncomfortable, which was perfect. So I walk up to the bar, and the lady's passing and passing and passing. I'm like, I guess I can't get any service here, huh? She's like, what do you want? I said, well, I'm drinking heavy today, so I want the strongest Sprite you can give me. And she smiled. I said, I got you, huh? She said, you did. You got me. I walked out of there with a contract. So you drop all that stuff, right? Like these white folks don't like me. I don't care. There ain't but one color that matters.
Green.
Absolutely. I'm going to try and get a contract. I'm at a fundraiser. I got a check, right? And that's all he cares about, right? And I'm trying to get a project. I don't care about all these people around me and that I'm uncomfortable. You better throw that off. You understand what I'm saying? That doesn't matter. But we get all hooked up in our feelings, you know what I'm saying? And you lose money. Forget about that. So I had another situation with Sewage and Water Board. They looking at my tax returns. So you got Joe the teacher, the professor, this person and that person looking at my tax returns. And they said, well, Mr. Glapion, we don't think you DBE qualified anymore. I said, how do you know? They said, well, we're looking at your tax returns. I said, really? Great. I'm not looking at yours. I used to really be cocky. I've toned down quite a bit. I said, I'm not looking at yours. Why are you looking at mine? So well, based on your tax returns, we just don't think you're disadvantaged anymore. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Are you looking at any of my competitors' tax returns? Well, we don't think that's relevant. What do you mean you don't think that's relevant? That's who I'm competing against. And I'm the only person with an African-American testing lab, right? And you saying that I made it, but you're not looking at their tax return. So how do you know that I'm where I need to be, right? And I told them why. I said, because I'm making more than y'all have ever seen. Because you're a school teacher. And that's just where I was at that point, right? So I took my little data and I slid it down the thing. And I said, the next time you look at my tax returns, it'll be 10 times more than what you're looking at now. So the motivation, right? The motivation. What I'm saying is that sometimes you have to be that person to get to where you need to be. And you have to believe in yourself, right? And that the only thing that can stop you is you. Not the color of your skin, not the DBE program, none of that. I've done more business in Jefferson Parish than you could shake a stick at. One black council person. The work comes through the council.
Yeah. And Jefferson Parish, for those who don't know, is considered to be not friendly to us black folks. Just letting you know.
Did extremely well. Because I'm about business, right? I'm about business. And I didn't shun Jefferson Parish and say, I'm not going to be able to do any work there. Or St. John, St. James, St. Charles, Baton Rouge, I was in Baton Rouge before Sharon.
Yeah.
Right? So you go where the money is, and you don't think about everything we've had to go through, because that'll hold you back. Forget about that. I'm going to get this paper.
Yes.
Right? My brother-in-law, John, he said, let's go play basketball. This is way, way back when. I can't play basketball, but, I'm in the gym. They got chandeliers in the gym and all this raised paneling, right? And there's nobody in there that looks like us except he and I. Right? We're showering. I said, John, where the brothers at? He said, what you talking about? I said, where the brothers at? He said, the only color that matters is green. And that's what we have to remember. Don't be scared. Go where you're uncomfortable. Go get that money and believe that nobody can stop you but you. Failure is a learning process. Go get that money. Yeah. And people like to be around people with money.
Yeah. Yes. Something that you said that stood out to me was they were looking at your tax returns. So something that I have noticed is that, and particularly when Black people have the power of the pen to write you a contract, which they do often in government, right? That's probably the largest space where Black people have like the largest number of power of the pen, right? To write like millions of dollars of contracts, and are the people that actually determine who wins the contracts. However, what I have found with those people is that sometimes when they feel like you've made it, they don't want to give you more.
Correct.
And they don't think the same way for white people.
That's correct.
And so a white company can continue to grow. Next thing you know, you blink, they're a $300 million company. Yeah. But if you get your little $3 million and they're like, oh, they got enough, next person. I don't know where that mentality came from. But it is one that I have seen time and time again.
Sevetri, I know where it came from. It came from what has been inbred in us from the days of slavery. You know, we have to be very careful, and that's what we need to understand. We need to understand where we came from. So the divisiveness that we have as a people started back then, where you or your family, your people were raped, so now you look a little bit more like them, so you get to go in the house. Mm-hmm. Well, now I'm better than the field because I'm with them, right? Mm-hmm. And now I feel better because I'm better than you. And now you transcend that way down the line, and we still doing the same thing. So you got enough. I don't need you to get any more. Well, I don't have a problem with
this person,
but I got a problem with you having more.
Yeah.
We are.
Love to count pockets.
We are counting our own pockets, but we're not counting the right pockets.
Yeah.
Like the guy told me, you think you all that, they way over here, right? So we need to start realizing that some of us, it's okay for us to become billionaires. It's okay for the politician to say, don't give me that. They qualified. And yes, I did that. But they got this contract too. Yes, they did. That's the point we got to get to as a people. And we have to help and respect the people who look like us, who have more money than we do, right? And stop chopping them down because they got more than us. Does that make sense?
No, two examples of that. One, and you can attest to this, you're not online as much as we are. I'll give you an example. You probably are familiar with it. But some of the founders that we know have sold their companies, like Mael, like Honeypot, and they have made, 9-figure exits. And the first thing you see in the comments is people say, you a sellout. And I'm like, they just created generational wealth for the next 5-10 generations. And people are calling them a sellout because they sold their company when we're like, that's the goal. That's the dream.
I sold mine.
Right. So it's like this idea like that is crazy. Why would you sell out now? You just selling out to the white company, the white man. When I'm like, to your point, we're starting at zero. Yeah. So that $300 million, then guess what? Maybe my children can go be the next Procter and Gamble.
Yeah.
Because now they actually have the wealth that accumulated for me to invest, to your point, $10 million, whatever it may be, in their company, so they don't have to go out and ask somebody else for anything.
And we have to get off the bandwagon of attacking us. Stop. We as a people need to stop attacking us verbally, attacking us physically. There is no need for a clan anymore. We the clan. We killing more of us than anybody. They don't need a clan. I mean,
controversial take.
Well, I'm just saying, at the end of the day, the violence that's in our urban communities is us on us.
I mean,
but there's a lot of reasons for it too, though.
There's all the reasons for it. There's more reasons than you could shake a stick at. We got here in a certain way.
But also, to clarify, most crime is black on black, white on white, Hispanic on Hispanic, Asian on Asian. So just to clarify for my people in the audience, of course, it's more black on black crime because there's also more white on white crime, Hispanic on Hispanic. Most people actually commit crimes against people they know. Just want to say that.
This is also true. But you can also look at, let's look at Los Angeles, right? The Bloods and the Crips. And why were they started? They were started because of the Los Angeles Police Department that wouldn't allow us to cross a certain line. So these gangs were created to take care of our people. But because of the lack of our ability or for people to allow us to participate in society, it became what it became. And so when you're at the bottom, even if it's in New Orleans and some of our gangs that we have, if you're not going to give me an opportunity, I'm going to find a way to make an opportunity.
Yeah, survival.
Right? So there is a reason for that, no question about it. We have never been given the opportunity. And it's so hypocritical in a way where if you had just, when we were free, said, okay, you know what? We're all equal now.
We are all actually free.
We're all equal.
Yeah.
Things would be a lot different. Quick story. My friends from Costa Rica come here and we got the statue situation and people are flying these rebel flags and all of this, right? They made an interesting comment. They said, didn't that war already get settled? Why are they flying those flags, right? So the hypocrisy in this country is interesting in the fact where you'll fly a rebel flag, but you say you're an American. But that was two countries fighting each other. And one won and one lost. But you're a patriot because you're flying a rebel flag, but you're an American. What?
Yeah.
What? Right? So.
Yeah. Something, and I'm not sure if Sheena has some
I
thoughts,
have
but
so much, but I was like, I'm trying to think of how to ask it so that we're not here for another hour. Because I will say this. So my second company that I started was a fintech company, financial technology. And our at least the original idea was around building infrastructure, digital banking, so many different other pieces for starting out was unbanked and underbanked. Eventually, of course, it came more broader to saying more like financial inclusion from a global standpoint. And one thing that, what has now led to the research work that I do now, which is the point of the communities, is the research work is around the fact that even when it comes to the issues in our community, the wealth building of our community, even the data historically hasn't been true to the issues. So in order to fix issues, policy, technology, those solutions also have not been the best because the data and the research behind it hasn't always been true. You talk about redlining talk about housing a long time ago. Highways, how and why highways were built the way they were built.
Absolutely.
It's so much, but now being in research mode, a lot of the research is skipping around some of the factual pieces. And so we're headed as a whole towards zero, but even to build policy, to build solutions, we're missing out on so many pieces to still get there.
We as a people have to do whatever we can do to help, number one, everybody. But we also have to look at things differently when we look at each other, right? And if we have so-called made it, those of us who have whatever that means, right? You got to have a long coattail and you got to bring some people with you. And you have to have the patience to bring them with you. I'm involved in a lot of community organizations. I do things from a philanthropic standpoint. I give the message that I can give to help whoever I can help in any way that I think that I can help them. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody needs to do that. My dad would tell me when he leaves the house, he would help or do at least one good thing. So through the course of a year, he had done at least 365 good things for people, mm-hmm. right? And if you have that mindset that you're really here to help people, I mean, you're going to work hard and you're going to land wherever you're going to land, right? I mean, God has a plan for you. If you work, you bust your tail, you're going to be where you're going to be. It's not that you're going to be here or there, but wherever you're going to land is where you're going to land. Yeah. We need to help some people along the way. And I think we as a people have a tendency not to help each other. We have to really, really dig down and help each other. What you're doing, I'm working on an initiative right now that I think it's large and it's in a space that's really near and dear to my heart. And so if we continue to do that, I don't think we'll ever catch up financially, but we need to change our mindset as a people and not speak poorly about each other. Be careful an artist is an artist, but be careful what we say, because people listen to what we say and what we sing and how we treat ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And it can be very detrimental to our mindset, which has already been damaged from where we came from and where we are, particularly financially. I mean, it's going to be really hard. I tell my boys all the time, I said, just remember, when we pass and you accumulate, you still have nothing. You have nothing, from a financial standpoint. And you have to build on that and continue to build on that. And at some point, maybe we'll catch up, but we probably won't.
Yeah. One thing that I think about, which I love this stat, so positive stat, is that I was telling my brother, he's like in his late 40s, and I was like, oh, his generation is the lost generation because they were lost to mass incarceration. And so now we have some of the lowest numbers that we have seen in probably 3 decades of incarcerated Black people. And so that lets me know that we learned something from their generation. And people are like, oh, yeah, I'm not trying to go into jail, And so hopefully that is like one piece that allows us to kind of like turn around. There's like this idea of like, oh, you can't build wealth behind bars.
Yeah.
And so that's one situation where I feel like it's opportunity for us to, if we're fixing that, if the numbers are going backwards, that's like a good sign that we can turn things around in various spaces that impact us the most.
Absolutely.
And mass incarceration being one of them.
Absolutely. And understand how mass incarceration actually started and who signed off on it.
Exactly.
I mean, you really have to.
The history of it.
Right. The politics, we have 2 parties and both of them are bad. I mean,
It's like somebody said,
people are mad about
the better, the worse, or the worst.
Donald Trump being president, but he got there for 2 reasons. One, the Republican, and the other in his Democratic Party. And we have to be careful in the next election of who's coming up next, right? I mean, we have to start making noise like we did back in the day. Back in the day of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and, Huey, all these, we have to start making noise and make demands on our elected officials. That's what we have to do. We're not making noise now. We're too busy doing whatever we're doing. We're not making real noise.
What do you think about Black Lives Matter, though? Because Black Lives Matter was essentially the second coming of the civil rights movement, right?
It
worked for a little bit, and then it went back.
Well, and
the
correct
backlash,
me if I'm wrong.
We feel like, for me, MAGA, all that is like the backlash of white people having to sit on their hands and say nothing while people paraded all these initiatives.
It was definitely a movement. And I don't want to get into the details of what happened to the money with Black Lives Matter.
we're not gonna do it. My friend would go crazy on that one.
But at the end of the day, that was good to assert yourself in a position, meaning us as a people, to say we do matter.
We are powerful.
We were very powerful.
I think we've underestimated our power. And I think even now, though, we're looking at like the Target thing. We're like, holy crap, like we stuck together. Like we really made I know that we are powerful. I think it's coming together as a community to really understand our power. I don't want to go too far off of it, but even, as entrepreneurs and business and raising money, particularly as women, we are starting businesses as entrepreneurs, highest rate than anybody else. But we also close our businesses at a higher rate than anyone else. And it goes back to people always saying, oh, as Black people, we have $1.3 trillion in buying power. How much of that money goes back to a Black business or the Black community? Very few. But it's more deeply rooted than that. Because in order for me to scale a company, Sevetri talks about this all the time on Threads. In order for me to scale a company to be a multi-billion dollar company, people infuse those companies with capital.
Right.
ain't nobody writing us a check for.
I'm always harping on that. I'm like, y'all.
Look, my sister's
Ain't
going
enough
through it right
hustle.
now. My sister bought Black Opal and Fashion Fair. You know, I helped her with some of her financing, and she's still struggling with, you know, the capital that she needs to take it to the next level.
So it's like, well, we have 1.3 trillion, but it's not going back to the Black community. It's not because technically we can't give it to the Black community. It's because our businesses are shutting down, not because we don't have great ideas, we don't have great businesses. Half of us are great operators and executors. But you have to have capital infused
because
to grow.
Hustle only takes you so far, right?
Hustle takes you so far.
But if no one is writing, especially as Black women, we get less than 1% of DC dollars.
Yeah.
So if no one is giving us a capital so that you can take your 1.3 trillion and put into our companies, we're still losing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Desi could speak on that all day long.
Yeah, we'll have to get her on a podcast, maybe in New Orleans.
And she'll be here next week.
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
We've been texting, so we definitely want to have her on. One last question I have before we kind of wrap it up, and that is, do you still or even believe that the best way to build generational wealth is through owning a business? Or do you think that that's not necessarily the case?
I think it is the case, because if you're working for someone, you're working for someone, right? So the person who's really making the money is the person who owns the business. So you can make generational wealth. It depends on how you define it, okay? So you could work for someone, your wife's working for someone, you're saving one salary, you're living off of one salary, you're creating generational wealth. You finance your kids to go to college. They're coming out of college without any debt, right? You own the home. You may have bought a couple of pieces of rental property. You pass. They have wealth. They're educated, and they have a pass down of assets. So that's a way to do it. Another way to do it, of course, is to start a business and own a business and then have another generation take that business to another level, right? So I think both ways are ways to do it. It's just, what do you have inside of yourself to have enough gumption to go down whatever path it is to go down? Having a business, starting a business, and running a business takes a special individual, and everybody's just not built for it, right? So I think the answer to the question is they're both ways of generating generational wealth. Because you could have a business and you may not accumulate as much wealth as an individual who works for a corporation, right? But you still have a legacy within a business that you can pass on to your kids. So I think
these are two perfect examples that you just gave, because both of them require a level of discipline.
Discipline is the key.
To do,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
To be able to say, we're going to live off our check, on my check, and then we're going to put up your check,
right?
And to like stick to it for years and years and years and years, and then also to build a company. Like both of those things take a large amount of discipline, but ultimately are two viable paths to building generational wealth.
Being successful takes discipline.
Yeah.
It takes a tremendous, regardless of how you do it, it takes a tremendous amount of discipline. And my dad told me one time, and I was 15 years old, he said, if I made $1 million a year, would I be rich? What? $1 million a year? And this is a minute ago, right? He said, not if I spent $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And those things stuck in my head to where you can make a lot of money, but if you spend a lot of money, you're on zero. Even Donald Trump, he said, that bum across the street is worth more than me. What? He's got a suit on, he's Trump towel, all this stuff, right? He said, because let's say he's worth zero. Right now, I got $300 million worth of debt. So it's all relative.
Yeah. The amount of people in America who makes six figures but live paycheck to paycheck is a crazy stat, by the way.
Right. Okay.
Crazy number.
So the key to wealth really has nothing to do with the money. It has nothing to do with money. The key to wealth is, are you happy? Are you happy with you? Are you happy with your significant other? Are you happy with the direction that your life is going in? Are you happy? Because if you're happy, you got more than anybody with a ton of money.
Yeah, and you're probably doing all right if you're happy. Because
Right.
most people are unhappy.
Financial stress.
Financial stress.
They got people.
So if you're happy, that might be a good indicator you're
Right.
doing okay.
And they got people with a lot of money.
It's very unhappy.
And
Miserable.
also that too.
Very unhappy.
Yeah.
So don't chase the dollar, chase the dream.
Yeah. Okay, so the final question we always ask all our guests is, what is your rich lesson? Now, this can be something that has cost you everything, cost you a lot to learn this, or something that cost you nothing to learn. What is that one thing that you learned that you like, oh, you need to know that?
On the financial side?
Anything. It could be anything.
Rich lesson. Oh, man. For me,
Now that's gotten him speechless.
Does this not happen often?
because what have I learned? Temperament.
Yeah.
Well, temperament and to really love everybody, right? I mean, temperament and to love everybody, because everybody's flawed. Everybody got an issue. Everybody's got problems. And to say, there's still a good person in there somewhere. Temperament. Be patient. Be patient, and learn how to walk away. If it's not your gig, that's not your type, just walk away. You don't have to say anything. Just walk away. Temperament. Pick your battles, right? Pick your battles. But to really love everybody, be cool with everybody, you don't have to deal with everybody. You don't have to deal with every issue. You don't have to voice your opinion about everything. Be quiet. Move on. Move away. Be at peace with yourself, right? Be at peace with yourself. Because if you're not at peace with yourself, you ain't going nowhere.
All right.
Temperament.
Temperament. That's the rich lesson of this episode. Thank you, Roy.
Oh, we
Can't
always
thank
leave
y'all
out. We
enough.
leave out with a boom.
Oh, yes.
Boom.
And that's our episode, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.